clicked the record, so we are now recording the session. So I think I'm just going to hand you straight over to Jennifer. I think Jennifer is going to speak first around the good neighbours things. So hello, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'll just open up the presentation for you and then I'll chat. I don't think I can do both at the same time. Okay, can everybody see it?
Yep.
Oh, good. Right. Okay, so does anyone know how to change the, there we go. It was just being slow. It didn't react immediately, so I thought it wasn't working. So yes, my name's Jenny. I work for Northamptonshire as a rural officer, and that involves all sorts of things with sorting rural community or helping rural communities with anything from well-being, community transport, neighbourhood plans, but primarily this year it seems to be good neighbours schemes. That seems to be the hat I'm wearing at the moment, just purely because of the coronavirus crisis and because we got some lottery funding earlier in the year in April to set up good neighbours schemes. So I'm going to talk about good neighbours schemes today. So originally, and some of you might have been aware of this, we had a project called the Rural Wellbeing Service, and that was a 4-year lottery funded project, and it involved taking the RIC, which was our bus, into villages to offer advice and signposting to other organisations. And the main aim of that was to reduce isolation and loneliness in the over 50s in rural villages. It helped to set up many clubs and activities in those areas, and off the back of that project we really realised that there was a lack of support in villages and people weren't able to access the same support that they were able to access in towns. So there's lots of organisations out there that can help people, but they perhaps don't have that reach to the rural communities, and rural communities were missing out. So we, from the back of that Rural Wellbeing Service, started a Good Neighbour project. We've been running Good Neighbours schemes actually for a couple of years, primarily with South Northants and Daventry Council. And we've got around 30 Good Neighbours schemes across Northamptonshire. This project actually started in April, and that was to develop another 30 Good Neighbours schemes across Kettering, Corby, Wellingborough and East Northants. We will have 2 full-time workers working on this project, but at the moment it's just me because of COVID-19 and recruiting in the middle of a pandemic. We are essentially helping communities set up new Good Neighbours schemes, and we can offer each of those new schemes £700 to help with those setup costs. It says up to 10 a year, that's, so we can offer 10 new schemes a year, that's £700. We're also going to be going out and hiring the RIC again for 10 events, and that's where other organisations can link with us. So if you're an organisation that perhaps wants to reach rural communities, you can buddy up with us and we'll take you out on the RIC and reach those communities which perhaps wouldn't normally find out about your organisation and how they can get extra help. And we're also going to be having a Good Neighbour annual event where other organisations can come along and talk to our Good Neighbour schemes. So I'll talk a bit about what Good Neighbour schemes are and then how that will work. So Good Neighbour schemes are run by local volunteers who provide day-to-day support for other residents who need help on a regular or occasional basis. So these are the sorts of things that you would expect a neighbour to do. So they're not taking on any sort of care work, but it's more sort of day-to-day things like popping to the shop for some milk, helping scrape their path if it's icy, outside of COVID-19, perhaps helping them change a light bulb, you know, just neighbourly stuff. So this is really important because it actually helps lots of people. So not just older people who might need that support, although that's primarily who these schemes help, but also younger families as well are helped by Good Neighbour schemes. And for the older people, that helps them to live independently in their homes for longer and reduces that feeling of isolation and loneliness. And again, like I said, it's low-level reliable support. So it's just building those relationships in the local community and essentially really developing that neighbourly feeling in rural communities. So the support that our Good Neighbour schemes offer, and it varies from scheme to scheme. So some of our schemes target primarily older people, and some of them work with younger families. It really depends on the need in the village or community, and Good Neighbour schemes tailor their offer depending on the people that are most likely to need support. The sorts of things that Good Neighbour schemes can offer are things like changing light bulbs, checking smoke alarms, giving lifts to surgery or clinics, hospital visits, helping them fill out forms, reading and writing letters, identifying postal and email scans, dog walking, caring for pets, helping with shopping, and befriending. So just having a cup of tea or a chat on the phone. It really is up to the schemes, and they all decide for themselves and from the volunteers they have as to what they're happy to offer in their community. So the scheme is set up by what we call a steering group, and that can be from members of the local parish council, from members of local organisations like the WI or neighbourly groups. So it depends on who the sort of doers in the village or the community are, but usually there'll be a setup of a steering group, which is a group of volunteers, and then they will recruit people in the local community to help others. And a scheme can help, well, in this particular slide it says they can get up to 5 requests for help in a week, and I know from some of our schemes recently have been doing a lot more than that. When Byfield, for an example, have done over 2,000 prescriptions since April, and have in some cases had 70-80 calls a week. So it really does depend on the scheme as to how much they do, and some schemes have hardly any calls a week, and some have masses and masses of calls. And obviously in the middle of a pandemic, the need has been that these Good Neighbour schemes have had a lot more demand for their services. So on a day-to-day basis, there'll be a coordinator or duty officer who has a mobile phone, details of the volunteers who are prepared to offer and what they're prepared to offer. Any resident of the local community can ring the number and ask for help. The coordinator will find them an available volunteer who will help them. And in some cases, if the person that's ringing has a need which is outside the remit of the Good Neighbours, they'll signpost to other volunteer or charities. And so if that's something that you think your organisation can offer, get in touch with us, because we regularly send out an e-bulletin to our Good Neighbour scheme, and part of that is highlighting to them the organisations which they should be working with, and letting them know about it, so that you're on the Good Neighbours radar, so that if they do find someone in need, they know who the right person is to signpost. Because Good Neighbours schemes have been set up to make sure that they are able to help people most in need, and they're very, very good at finding vulnerable people in their community. And where they find someone where the need is more than neighbourly support, they will make sure that they signpost to the right organisation. So help is given to those that need it free of charge, although volunteers can claim back mileage from the scheme. The scheme is organised by a steering group who recruit the volunteers, determine the need and capacity in the area, get funding, and all our Good Neighbour schemes are fully insured. They have training, and that's provided by the Good Neighbour schemes themselves and also by ACRE, and they make sure the DBS checks are carried out if they're needed. They usually have a central mobile phone which is passed around, although more recently some of the schemes have started setting up a redirect system. And they also run activities. So part of what Good Neighbour schemes do really, really well is running regular events, so that they are finding people in the local community that need support. And if you're just getting a leaflet through the door, that's quite cold and impersonal, and they're less likely to say, yes, I need help. What Good Neighbour schemes will do is start to really become part of that community, and make sure that they are well known and trusted. And then people will start to open up to them and say, do you know what, I'm really struggling, I need help with X. And it's that relationship and building trust which really makes Good Neighbours schemes work, because it's more personal, and they are more likely to say to a neighbour, I need help with this, where they perhaps might not respond to a leaflet through the door. So that's how they work. So lots of schemes have started setting up recently, primarily at the moment through COVID-19 pop-up groups, which have decided to carry on supporting their neighbours. And actually, I think that's a really important transition from a neighbour support group, which has just popped up during COVID-19, into a more sustainable and safe method of running a neighbourhood group like a Good Neighbours scheme. So there is a system for setting up, and essentially you identify the need in your local community and people which are prepared to volunteer, and check that you've got people that want help and also that you have people that were able to offer that help. That's the minimum really that you need. And what we recommend is that the steering group of coordinators is made up of 3 or 4 people. If you have 1 or 2, then you can really suffer from burnout, and you want to be able to take a break from volunteering. The schemes need a constitution and ideally a bank account, because they will then be able to access the funding to pay for things like insurance. The Good Neighbour schemes don't cost a huge amount to set up. They require insurance, which is around £150 a year, a mobile phone, and therefore either a pay-as-you-go contract or a normal phone contract. They might want a laptop, although a lot of our schemes just carry around a simple folder and pen and paper. That works. Publicity and marketing material, leaflets. What a lot of our schemes do is fridge magnets that can go on people's fridges because pieces of paper are lost, and then obviously the ongoing costs of DBS checks for volunteers. And funding is available to help with that, depending on where you are in the county. So in Northamptonshire, as a rule, Kettering, Wellingborough, East Northants and Corby can have up to £700 from Northants ACRE to set up a scheme. In South Northants and Daventry, there is £1,000 to help set up Good Neighbours schemes. So depending on where you are in the county, there is pots of money available to help with the ongoing costs. And even if there isn't you've already set up a COVID-19 group, you can convert that to a Good Neighbour scheme. So it doesn't matter if you're up and running already. So we have a free toolkit and step-by-step guide to setting up these schemes. We have lots of constitutions, policies, promotional material, because all of our Good Neighbour schemes tend to share resources and help each other out. So we have a whole bank of material which people can access free of charge, which works for other schemes. There are evaluation forms we can give you for helping to monitor your scheme, which is really useful for accessing funding. And also other schemes and Northants ACRE can help you with experience, policies, ideas, mentoring. We have regular get-togethers as part of a network at the moment via Zoom. So you can ask the other Good Neighbours schemes or community groups questions and see how they're doing, because you can guarantee that they've come across a problem that you're experiencing. There's around 30 schemes, as I said now, so they're a really good hive mind. And we're in the process of creating a forum, which will be linked to our website, where you could go in and ask questions and share resources and ideas and that sort of thing. So that's in the process of being created at the moment and coming soon. So if you're interested in Good Neighbour schemes, I'm around for questions now, but the best thing to do is to email me. It's jennifer.hedges@northantsacre.org.uk, and I'll pop a link to that in the chat as well. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. And we're really interested in groups which are supposed to, or in the process of perhaps becoming a neighbourhood group, but also other organisations that might want to work with our Good Neighbours schemes as well. So that's my sort of run through of Good Neighbours schemes. Has anyone got any questions? Alison, I think you're muted.
Yeah, maybe if we do questions after Francis has talked as well.
Okay.
That might be the best thing to do. So if I quickly make Francis a co-host, I have done that. So Francis, you should be able to share your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alison, and thanks, Jenny. So, Right, well, I am Frances Harris. I'm Community Facilities Advisor for Northamptonshire ACRE. I work alongside Jenny. I think we're pretty complementary actually. So whereas Jenny specialises in the more general area of rural affairs for Northamptonshire ACRE, I'm a little bit more focused in that I work with community facilities such as village halls, community buildings, and similar organisations. So as I've said, I provide advice for community facilities. Those are mainly village halls, but there are other organisations as well. The focus is on village halls because that has traditionally been the role of the Village Halls Advisory Service, which is in fact a national service provided throughout England via the ACRE network. And that's a network of 38 rural community councils. Northamptonshire ACRE is a charity. It's a rural community council. There's a similar organisation in every county of England, and together we make up the ACRE network. Now, this role, the work that we do, is funded in part by DEFRA, and a core part of that work is the Village Halls Advisory Service. And in fact, Northamptonshire ACRE has been providing this service, advice to village halls, since its inception in 1947. But the Village Halls Advisory Service, through the ACRE network, in fact, got going in the 1920s, so it has quite a venerable history. The ACRE network works with the Charity Commission to provide advice and guidance to charities on land and property issues. And that's why ACRE's model legal documents for village halls are approved by the Charity Commission. And that includes the new Charitable Incorporated Organisation, or CIO, Constitution for a Village Hall, which is a new corporate model for charities. And many are now looking at this. There are certain advantages to it in that you are not regulated by Companies House. So this is a good option for charities who are thinking about incorporating. Now, as I've said, my role is to provide advice mainly to charities, but not exclusively, but basically to organisations who manage community buildings, and those can include village halls, church halls, WI halls, community centres, sports halls, recreation grounds, playing fields and parks. Often these are owned and managed by charities, but also local authorities, so parish councils and town councils. The advice that I can give covers a number of areas, and I think the easiest way is to break it down into the main headlines, which probably the bulk of the advice is in relation to governance. So it's issues surrounding governing documents, understanding them, how to amend them and update them, advice around the role of charity trustees, what a charity trustee does, a managing trustee, holding trustee, custodian trustee, issues around trustee liability. That's quite important, I think, for a lot of charities at the moment. And as I've mentioned, incorporation. We can also provide advice about law as it is applicable to charities, the most obvious being charity law, but there's others such as health and safety and licensing. We can help with Charity Commission regulations, so when do you need to register, things like reporting and accounting. And we also have on hand policies, sample policies, and we can also help with funding and grant applications. Now, Northamptonshire ACRE isn't in itself a grant funder, but we can help with providing advice as to the most appropriate grant funder for your project. And if you need help with making a grant application, that's something that we can provide. We also have regular training events. Most recently, we've covered trustee roles and responsibilities. We've got one coming up in September, which will be looking at understanding your governing document. We've also in the past run events on incorporation for small charities, data protection, most recently the General Data Protection Regulation, of course, social media and how you can make that work for your community facility, and portable appliance testing. The advice that we give can be given on an ad hoc basis, but most organisations actually choose to access advice via our community facilities membership scheme. This costs £40 a year, and the membership year runs from April until March. There are many benefits, but I guess the principal ones are that you get 5 hours free phone and email advice. You have access to free copies of National ACRE's invaluable Village Hall information sheets. There are about 40 of them on a whole range of different topics, and they really are incredibly useful. We also produce a bi-monthly newsletter with up-to-date news about issues affecting community facilities. And we can also give a discount on National ACRE's model legal documents. So these are things like trust deeds, the CIO constitution I mentioned, a license to occupy, a lease, and very usefully, I think, for many halls actually, a model hiring agreement. I'm going to look at a few case studies of the sorts of problems and issues that I've helped halls with recently. But before I do that, I just wanted to cover government help that is available for principally community buildings during the current COVID-19 crisis. Now, the main one is a £10,000 grant. It's the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant. And this is for organisations such as community buildings which have been forced to close. And it is available from your local authority. These are starting to close now with a gradual opening up of community buildings. But if you haven't received that, I would recommend that you get in touch with your local business, the business department of your local authority. You will also be entitled to 100% business rates relief for this year, 2020-21. And finally, please do look at an information sheet which National ACRE has issued to help community buildings reopen post-lockdown. And there is a link there to it, and if you need to, you can access it via ACRE's website. There's a link to it also on Northamptonshire ACRE's website as well. That is extremely helpful if you're grappling with reopening at the moment. So a case study, I've had a few organisations contact me recently about what to do if they have a problem with a particular trustee, and the question they've asked is, can they remove someone so that they are no longer a member of their management committee? The simple answer to that is that you can't do that unless there is a specific power to do so in your governing document, and that is very unusual. So if you are unfortunately in this sort of a situation, really what you need to do is talk it through with the person involved and see if you can come up with a solution that way, rather than, as it were, forcibly removing them. But what I would suggest is the best thing to do is to try and avoid it in the first place. And the best way of doing that is to have a good induction policy for new trustees. So have an induction process. So you talk through the role of a charity trustee so that when the person first joins your committee, they understand what that role involves, that you need to attend meetings, that they understand what their responsibilities are, and all those sorts of issues. The other thing I think it's good to have is a trustee code of conduct. And the Small Charities Commission has recently drawn up one of these. It's very good, it's quite straightforward, and it just sets out things like, you know, behaving appropriately in committee meetings, listening respectfully to other people's opinions, and that's also, I think, a useful tool to have if you have problems on your committee. So another area where I can help, I've got a couple of halls actually in the situation I've described here, where they are in existing buildings which are in need of refurbishment, a major refurbishment. And the question arises, well, actually, would you be better off, rather than rebuilding, would you be better off actually building a new site, a new hall, or indeed finding a new site on which to build a new hall? And one hall I'm currently working with found themselves in a landlocked site. They had no parking at all. It was badly in need of refurbishment. And after many years of just allowing the situation to carry on, they decided to hold a village consultation, and eventually did find that there was support for finding a new site and building a new hall. And what that now means for them is that they can sell their current site and use the proceeds to buy a new site and put those proceeds also towards building the new hall. Now, in the process of going through all this, they've decided also that they'll become a CIO, because that will help to reduce the risk that they may be exposed to in managing a major building project, which clearly building a new hall is. Much simpler, I'm often contacted by community buildings wanting to reduce their energy costs. I'm asked how to do it. Simply, the very easy thing to do is to conduct an energy audit, and I do have a toolkit for that. And it's a simple walk around a hall and just look at areas where you can improve things like insulation, which will then help to reduce your energy costs. But with this particular hall I'm talking about here, all they had to do was change their energy supplier. I put them in touch with some energy brokers who specialise in helping charities. They switched energy provider, and as a result saved £400 a year in terms of their energy costs. Governing documents do cause quite a bit of difficulty sometimes for community buildings. I was contacted by a parish council and village hall about a trust deed under which the parish council leased the village hall property to the village hall. This was shortly going to come to an end, and both parties wanted to extend it, and they came to me for advice. Well, after much checking of old files, and actually after just checking the Charity Commission website, the register, it transpired that there was an earlier trust deed and conveyance, and that in actual fact the charity owned the property and there was no need for a lease. So for some reason this later document had been drafted in error. Having discovered the problem, there's no need now to go to the cost of extending the lease. Both parties are now working in accordance with the correct governing document, and the Village Hall Management Committee are now looking at updating the governing document, which can be done relatively simply. Another area where quite a lot of help can be needed is in relation to trustee roles. In this instance, a village hall came to me because they were going to embark on a major refurbishment, and they came to me asking for funding advice. In the course of discussing this, they asked if their parish council, who is custodian trustee, should make the application for the grant funding. It then transpired that there was quite a bit of historic lack of clarity around the role of custodian trustee. Custodian trustee and holding trustee are both quite similar. They are trustees that hold legal title in the property of unincorporated charities. The role of managing the charity sits with the managing committee, so they're quite different roles. But other than holding legal title, the custodian trustee and the holding trustee has no role to play in the management, the running, the strategic or the day-to-day management of the charity's affairs. So having been through all this, both parties, both the parish council and the management committee, were clear about their respective roles, and the management committee therefore will now plan for the refurbishment project, and it is they who will apply for grants and who will manage the project. And that essentially is it. I don't know how many of you have been attending actually with an interest in village halls, or whether it was more with an interest in good neighbour schemes. But if there's anything you'd like to follow up, please feel free to get in touch with me. That is my email address, and you'll also find contact details on the ACRE website. So back to you, Alison. Alison, Alison, I think.
Sorry, well, there we are. Sorry. So we're a small group, so I think it's quite easy to handle asking questions. But we have actually already got some questions in the chat area, which is, we've got one here from Heather. What is a CIO, please? So I think that's directed at you, Francis. Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yes, a CIO stands for Charitable Incorporated Organisation, and it's a corporate model for a charity. Most small charities are unincorporated. That means that they don't have a separate legal identity. So the identity of the charity is in the trustees as an individual, i.e. in the management committee. And that's why for unincorporated charities, you need a custodian trustee or a holding trustee to hold legal title in your property. So one of the reasons for being incorporated, for example, by becoming a charitable incorporated organisation or CIO, one of the advantages with that is that you can hold, the charity can hold legal title in its own name. It has a separate identity. You don't need the separate role of a custodian or holding trustee, and the charity can enter into contracts in its own name as well. So that's why with the earlier example I gave with a major building project, it's very helpful to be able to enter into big expensive contracts with building companies in the name of the charity rather than in the separate names of trustees.
And to be honest, a lot of charities, I mean, the CIO has been out longer than I think it is. I say it's a new thing, but it's been around longer, times past. But a lot of charities have decided to make that move where they actually involve converting themselves to CIOs now that it's able to do that, because it means that they've got that corporate thing and they're not answering to two different regulators. And so outside of village halls or rural areas, it's something that charities should look at as if they're an older charity, in terms of thinking about whether CIO is the correct way to go. And not to be confused with CIC, which happens a lot, which is community interest company. So there is a difference, two different things there completely.
Absolutely. And just to add on Alison, to follow on what you were saying about a CIO, I guess the bit that's a bit more recent for village halls is that this specific CIO constitution for village halls was comparatively recently brought into being. When I say comparatively recently, it is a few years now. But the big advantage with that, of course, is that if you do incorporate using that constitution, it's been approved by the Charity Commission, so it's just tick, you know, and you can register, which is a huge advantage.
Yeah, yes. So had anybody got any other questions about either with Jennifer around the Good Neighbours scheme, or with Francis at all? So I have, Jennifer, because when you said about Kettering and Corby, does that mean that you're doing the outskirts of Kettering and Corby, or could Good Neighbours schemes start up within some of the, say in Corby, within like Oakley Vale or something like that?
So the classification for a rural community is less than 10,000 people in a community. So we are working with some groups which are you would think would be in the town, but are on the, I guess, the fringe of town. So if you're in the town centre, then we would probably say no. But if you're on that sort of urban fringe or a parish, then yes.
Fantastic. Have we got any other questions at all that anybody wants to ask? So I think that we will leave it there then. The session has been recorded, and so those recordings will be up by the Friday. So all of the sessions that have happened over the 3 days will be up on the website by Friday. So if you have missed a session at all, or you want to go back over a session, then they will be there. So I think I'm just going to leave it there and say a great thank you to Jennifer and Francis. I found that very interesting. I think as different organisations, we don't talk enough. So I found that very interesting to hear what you do. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for everybody else for coming along today. And I will say a goodbye to you all.
Goodbye.
Thank you.